What up, all my fight fans? So, we got ourselves a fight night this Saturday. We got ourselves a bare knuckle fight this Saturday. I'm talking about BKFC. I'm talking about bare knuckle fighting championship. We got ourselves Mike Perry versus Luke Rockhold. We got ourselves Eddie Alvarez versus Chad Mendes. I've been looking forward to it ever since they announced it, and I'm about to break it all down for you guys right here, right now. Let's go. Let's start with that main event, shall we? We got Luke Rockhold versus Mike Perry. This is Luke Rockhold's debut at the BKFC. Bare knuckle. This he just can't. He's fresh off the UFC. The last time he fought was last August against Paulo Costa in one hell of a war. He unfortunately he did lose that fight, but it was still one hell of a war. Luke Rockhold's been relatively inactive for quite some time. Prior to that fight with Paulo Costa, he was out for a long time. I want to say about 3 years. His last fight before that was against Jan Blachowicz, I want to say, where he got knocked out in that one as well. Well, not as well. He didn't get knocked out in that Paulo Costa fight. What I meant to say was he lost that one as well. So he's been on a bit of a losing skid. But this is a brand new Luke Rockhold. He said he's come back. He said he's trained. He is like really, really ready to go, really dedicated, really determined. So I'm very excited to see his return. Now you got Mike Perry, who's been in bare knuckle for quite some time now. He's had quite a few good fights. He had that great fight against MVP Michael Venom Page. He had another fight against what is his name, Julian Lane. It seems like Mike Perry was pretty much made for bare knuckle. It's like he was born to do this. And when Mike Perry fought in the UFC, nothing against him, but he had some really great fights. I remember that fight against Vicente Luque. That was one hell of a fight. But then when you put him up there against other guys who had great wrestling and great jiu-jitsu, such as Donald Cerrone and a few other good guys up there, he just didn't do all that great. He was able to get tapped. He was able to get taken down. He's just been more of a guy with the hands. His hands has always been one thing that you definitely do not want to mess with when it comes to Mike Perry. And he's shown that clearly in BKFC. So, this is going to be one of the fight, guys. This is at 175. 175, and Luke Rockhold's fought his whole life at 185. But, it looks like he's pretty much making weight. Looks like he's doing the damn thing. And it looks like we're going to be having this fight this Saturday. So, you know what? It's going to be very interesting. Very interesting because Mike Perry, like I said, he seemed like he was born for this. He seemed like he was ready to do this, bare knuckle fighting. And he got the hands. He got hands for days. He got heart for days. He got energy. This guy can brawl. Every time he gets hit, he just wants to hit you back. This guy's not afraid to get hit. He's not afraid to take a few shots in order to land a few shots on you. As far as Luke Rockhold goes, Luke Rockhold's relatively been good with his hands somewhat, but not really something like a knockout artist. We've always seen him really good with his kicks. He's always been beautiful with his kicks, and also has some really good jiu-jitsu regarding some of his matches. Like, you remember he submitted like Lyoto Machida and then Michael Bisping and whatnot. So he's been able to do that. Luke Rockhold's chin has been a little bit suspect. He's been in some fights. He's been in some wars. We've seen that knockout against Michael Bisping, Yoel Romero, Jan Blachowicz. He's had a few unfortunate fights where he did get knocked out quite a few times. So, but he looked really good against Paulo Costa, who Paulo Costa is no punk and he hits really hard. But this is going to be a little bit more different because Luke Rockhold is fighting at a much more lighter weight class, 10 pounds lighter than he usually fights at. And he's never been relatively good for his hands, and he's also doing it bare knuckle, which hasn't been done before. So the odds relatively should be in Mike Perry's favor, but Luke Rockhold probably rehydration is going to be in there a much more bigger guy. So it's going to be a little bit more tougher for Mike Perry to hit Luke Rockhold because Luke Rockhold has been training with Jason Perillo, who has been one hell of a boxing expert, he's trained guys like BJ Penn, I think Tito Ortiz, Rafael Dos Anjos. He's trained a lot of great high-level MMA fighters with their hands. And he's been training with Luke Rockhold for quite some time. I want to say about at least a year or two. I follow Luke Rockhold, and I've seen him in the gym with Jason Perillo and such. So that's going to be a very interesting task to see what actually can happen there. But honestly, the odds are correct on this one. I do believe they have it for Mike Perry, so I do see Mike Perry possibly edging out a decision in this one. It's going to be tough. It's going to be challenging. If Luke Rockhold can manage and keep himself, composed and not allow himself to overexert himself or get over excited and such, then I see he could possibly hang in there. Use that reach, use those long limbs that he has and such like that. And maybe he can show us a thing or two. You never know, because again, he is going in there the much bigger guy. I think this is the biggest guy Mike Perry's ever faced. With all the other guys that he has actually faced, he's always faced like welterweights. whether it be in the cage or in the ring, the circle, I guess you could say. Um, yeah, with Luke Rockhold, he's probably going to go in there about 180. I want to say about what, maybe 190, maybe 200 pounds, if not. So yeah, he can definitely do some damage if Luke Rockhold goes in there completely focused and ready. He can really, really strike with the best of them, 100%. Don't sleep on Luke Rockhold. But I really would edge out on Mike Perry on this one. The co-main event, you got ourselves Chad Mendes versus Eddie Alvarez. This one I'm very much looking forward to because, good God, who does not know Eddie Alvarez, the underground king? Eddie Alvarez had some of the best fights you have ever seen in your life. Who doesn't remember his wars against Michael Chandler, his war against Dustin Poirier, or his war against Justin Gaethje? You know, he became the UFC lightweight champion of the world by beating Rafael dos Anjos. You know, he's winning there with the best of the best. I'm talking about Gilbert Melendez. I'm talking about Anthony Pettis, Conor McGregor. You know, again, Michael Chandler. You know, just you name the guys, he's been in there in all multiple different organizations. You know, in Bellator, UFC, One. The guy's been everywhere, so he's definitely fought the who's who in the world. And when he made his announcement that he's going to be at BKFC, I was definitely excited because this guy's never in a boring fight. He always throws hands, hands, hands. He's very exciting, very exciting. I'm very pumped to see this fight. You know, because I always thought that he should have stood with the UFC. You know, one, he did okay. You know, it wasn't something that was super great. You know, I saw a couple of his fights, and you know, of course, he didn't do the very, very best. I just didn't think it was a good fit for him over there in one. But in the UFC, I felt like he could have still did a lot more. Yeah, he did lose very handily to Conor McGregor, but you know what? Everyone has an off night, and maybe that's what Eddie Alvarez had. I'm sure he could eventually work his way back to a title or a title shot, what have you. But yeah, I'm definitely excited to see him in the BKFC. He's going against Chad Money Mendes, who's already fought in the BKFC. I believe he's fought a boxer, I want to say. I can't remember the guy's name, so excuse me on that one. But, you know, Chad Mendes has always been a striker himself. He looked phenomenal in his BKFC debut I want to say, was last February, I believe it was, last year, back in 2022. You know, and Chad Mendes has always had hands. You know, you remember some of those fights that he had with Jose Aldo, with Clay Guida. You know, even he gave Conor McGregor a run for his money, but that was pretty much mostly the ground game and such and whatnot. Conor McGregor pretty much stopped him regarding the striking. But still, you know, Chad Mendes has always been one tough guy. He's always been very strong, very dedicated to his craft. Again, I follow him as well on social media. I see his boxing. I see his training videos. He is very crisp, very sharp, very on point. So, yes, this is going to be one hell of a war, guys. This is going to be one hell of a battle. I could definitely see this going multiple rounds because I don't see very much quit in either of these guys. It's going to be very hard. I could see it possibly being a doctor stoppage or possibly a TKO because you're just going to have to finish these guys. You're not going to knock them out. These guys are tough as nails, especially Eddie Alvarez. You know, Eddie Alvarez can bring it. Eddie Alvarez has been in some wars, but that pretty much says a lot too. Like, just because you've been in wars doesn't necessarily mean that you can continue going through wars. The more wars you go through, the less difficult, or the more difficult it is for you to take on that much damage later on in your career. Chad Mendes has been in a few wars himself, but definitely nowhere near compared to Eddie Alvarez. Who I favor in this one? Well, this is BKFC debut for Eddie Alvarez. Eddie Alvarez is, you know, he's been all in the MMA world for quite some time, and now this is his first time without using elbows, knees, takedowns, wrestling, and whatnot. He's pretty much going to just be using his hands, maybe a little grappling. Sure, there's a little grappling in this, but nothing too crazy, nothing too extravagant. Well, this is Chad Mendes' second time around, so he is a little bit more familiar with it. And of course, you do want to go with the guys, like I mentioned, in Mike Perry and Chad Mendes. You want to go with the guys who are a little bit more familiar because it's a little bit harder to get used to. It's not something you just do overnight. I get it; these guys train boxing, but it's different when you're actually in the show, when the show is going on, when you're live. You know, I've always heard that some people in the gym, they do great, but then some people, when they go out there and the light hits them, they just don't do all that good. And this is the first time for both Eddie Alvarez and Luke Rockhold to be in a ring, or a I guess you could say circle, not sure what you would call it, but I guess you could still say it's a ring, where they're not allowed to use any other weapons except for their hands. So it's definitely going to be a lot. You know, it's definitely going to be a lot. Sometimes it might be a little tentative. You never know. They might want to throw a kick or something. But yeah, I definitely very much looking forward to this. So I would favor Chad Mendes on this one for sure. So guys, there's a few other fighters on the card. I'm not gonna go through all of them, but there's one on there that I'm definitely excited for as well. Big Ben Rothwell, you know, he's making another run at BKFC. He's done it a few times as well, but that dude's a beast. That dude is one hell of a beast, and I'm very much looking forward to see who he faces. You know, you never know. We always talked about the possibility of Francis Ngannou coming to BKFC. You know, I know he priced himself out at that one time, but imagine we did see that. Imagine we saw Francis Ngannou versus Big Ben Rothwell. You're gonna tell me you don't want to see that? I know I would, 100% for sure. Definitely, it would definitely be one hell of a fight and one hell of a show. For sure, guys. So definitely tune in. Let me know in the comments on who you think is going to win. Let me know in the comments if you're going to watch. Let me know in the comments if you're excited or not. Like, subscribe, hit that notification button, and I'll see you guys in the next video.